closely at this man. This is King Louis III of West Francia. He slaughtered 9,000 Vikings in a single day, cementing his legacy as a ruthless god of war. So, what finally brought this unstoppable warlord to his knees? An enemy blade? A cunning assassin? No, it was a remarkably short wooden door. History books love to paint royalty as untouchable demigods who die heroic, poetic deaths on the battlefield. But the universe has a very sick, twisted sense of humor. Today, we are tearing the majestic crowns off history's most powerful rulers to expose the most embarrassing, absurd, and downright humiliating royal deaths ever recorded. Grab a seat, because the Grim Reaper does not care about your royal bloodline. Our first victim is the young warlord himself, Louis III. The year is 881. Louis is only 17 years old, yet he is already an absolute terror. At the Battle of Saucourt, he and his brother completely decimate a massive Viking army. The blood-soaked fields make him a living legend. Europe trembles at his name. But absolute power breeds absolute arrogance. Fast forward 1 year to 882. The proud 18-year-old king is riding his warhorse through the city streets when he spots a beautiful young girl. Fueled by royal entitlement and teenage hormones, Louis whips his horse and gives chase. The terrified girl sprints toward her father's house, darting inside through a low wooden doorway. Louis is moving too fast. He is so blinded by his own ego that he doesn't even think to duck. Crack! In a fraction of a second, the king's head violently slams into the thick wooden lintel of the door. The sheer force instantly shatters his skull. Just think about that for a second. A skull that survived the swinging axes of 9,000 bloodthirsty Vikings was completely pulverized by a peasant's front door. The great warlord slumped off his horse, bleeding into the dirt, and died right there on the spot. But if dying by a door is humiliating, the death of England's king is so filthy, royal historians actually tried to hide it. The year is 1016. King Edmund of England is a hardened, relentless fighter. They literally call him Edmund Ironside. He spends his reign violently clashing with King Canute and his invading Danish Vikings. The wars are so exhausting that the two kings finally sign a dark, desperate treaty. Whoever dies first surrenders the entire kingdom to the survivor. This wasn't a treaty. It was a blank check for assassination. And the assassin chose the absolute worst place imaginable to strike. It is November 1016, a freezing, pitch-black night. King Edmund makes his way to the castle latrine, a wooden outhouse protruding over the castle walls, dropping down into a deep, foul pit of human waste. Edmund sits down, completely vulnerable in the cold dark. He had no idea that someone was waiting for him down in the abyss. An assassin had climbed deep into the vile, suffocating filth of the cesspit, waiting patiently in the dark for hours. The second the king sat down, the assassin thrust a long, cold steel dagger violently upward, straight through the toilet hole, burying the blade deep into the king's bowels. Edmund Ironside, the great defender of England, did not die on a glorious battlefield. He died screaming in a toilet, bleeding to death from a dagger up his backside. And with that single, filthy strike, the crown of England was handed to the Vikings. Dying in a latrine is horrifying, but burning alive in your own bed, surrounded by servants, simply because someone couldn't find a pair of scissors, is a special kind of hell. Enter King Charles II of Navarre. History remembers him as Charles the Bad. For decades, he survived by betraying his allies, orchestrating assassinations, and playing England and France against each other. But in 1387, karma finally caught up to him. The aging king is struck by a mysterious illness that leaves his entire body paralyzed. His royal physicians prescribe a terrifying medieval treatment. To keep his useless body warm, He must be wrapped from head to toe in thick linen cloths, entirely soaked in highly flammable, distilled alcohol. The king is essentially a living mummy, trapped in his bed, reeking of raw spirits. Late at night, a servant girl is tasked with sewing the alcohol-soaked linen tightly around his body. When she finishes, she needs to cut the remaining thread. But she can't find her scissors. Out of sheer laziness, she decides to use the open flame of a candle to simply burn the thread off. It takes 1 millisecond. The open flame touches the alcohol-soaked fabric. Whoosh! The invisible alcohol vapors ignite in a massive, deafening fireball. In the blink of an eye, the paralyzed king's bed turns into a raging inferno. Charles the Bad, unable to move a single muscle, is roasted alive in his own chambers. His agonizing screams echo through the castle, but it is too late. The king who lived by the fire of betrayal, literally burned to a blackened crisp in his own bed. But the most gruesome, brutal death on our list didn't happen in a dark room. It happened in the bright sunlight, in front of thousands of cheering spectators. June 30th, 1559, Paris. King Henry II of France is celebrating the end of a 60-year war. To show off his royal strength, the king straps on his heavy, shining gold armor and enters a jousting tournament. His opponent is a young, powerful captain of his own royal guard, Gabriel de Montgomery. The crowd roars. The two men charge at each other on horseback at full speed. Smash! Montgomery's thick wooden jousting lance slams into the king's chest and shatters on impact, exactly as it's supposed to do. But physics had a much darker plan. A massive, razor-sharp splinter of shattered wood spirals through the air and slides perfectly through the tiny eye slit of the king's golden helmet. The jagged wood violently pierces the king's right eye, driving deep into the frontal lobe of his brain. The king collapses from his horse, bleeding profusely. But the true horror? He didn't die instantly. For 10 agonizing days, the greatest medical minds in Europe tortured the king, using cold iron tweezers to pull rotting, blood-soaked splinters out of his infected eye socket while he was wide awake. The infection slowly melted his brain. The most powerful monarch in Europe died a miserable, mind-shattering death, all because of a freak accident at his own party. People sacrifice everything for wealth, power, and the illusion of control. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor. If your destiny is to be taken out by a low door frame, a careless maid with a candle, or a dagger in a toilet, the heaviest gold crown in the world will not save you. The next time you envy the rich and powerful, just remember, the Grim Reaper doesn't care about your title. And sometimes, he hides in the most ridiculous places. Hit that subscribe button if you want more dark, unfiltered history that your teachers were too afraid to tell you. I will see you in the next video.